Potter.
Scotty B going to work in the paint.
Eastern Conference Final. New NBA champion. And it's a team from Toronto, Canada. We the North are now we the champions.
What is going on, Raptors Nation? It is Luca here, back with the Raptors Nation podcast. Hope you're all doing well. We got a jam-packed show, and this one I'm going to be talking about BBQ. They got some games under their belt. Of course, for the first time this season, the Raptors did roll out their starting lineup, their full starting lineup. It's been a long time coming. We'll talk about that. We're going to take a look at Chris Boucher, who's been breaking out as of late, getting that trade value up. And then finally, we're going to have a little bit of fun, talk about some early draft targets for this Raptors team, because, of course, it's never too early to start talking about the 2025 NBA draft, just given where this team is at. So do me a solid, guys. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And please leave us a 5-star review on this pod. You can find it wherever you get your favorite podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. We got you covered. Raptors Nation podcast coming to you every single week. As you can see, I'm rocking the Baltimore Ravens sweater. My Ravens in action against the Steelers Saturday night. Raptors, they're having a tough season. Hopefully the Ravens can have a successful season and salvage my sports year. As, the Ravens are going to be trying to knock off the Steelers to move on through. If you're an NFL fan, big weekend for the NFL wildcard weekend. And, of course, the Raptors, they will be in action Saturday night against the Detroit Pistons to conclude their 3-game road trip. But let's kind of backpedal here a little bit, and let's take a look at BBQ being back. Of course, it was officially the case that the Raptors had their full starting lineup and rotation available when they took on the Milwaukee Bucks to begin this week on Monday, January 6th. A lot of excitement going in. And that excitement basically faded after the first quarter. It was a rough go. Raptors got blown out of their building. Bucks did not have Middleton, but it did not matter. They were led by Damian Lillard, who had 25. Giannis actually, he had a quiet game scoring-wise, only had 11 in that game. But they got big contributions from off the bench. Gary Trent Jr., of course, returning to Toronto, putting up 17. Bobby Portis Jr. had 20. Ryan Rollins had 10. And it was a rough go for BBQ. First game of the season for the trio. Barrett actually had a nice game. Barnes, but Emmanuel quickly, he did only have 11 points. And you could see they were starting to try to figure it out amongst each other. And, this was the game that, Barrett said that it was, he wanted to see the Raptors put forth more effort and more of a fight, calling out the Raptors after that performance. And he actually said it's not a chemistry thing. He just felt like the team wasn't competing hard. And he said it's one thing to, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said it's one thing to lose, but when you're not fighting, that's an issue. So it was not a good debut for BBQ for this year. Then they played the Knicks, much better in that first half. They actually made it a game, but then the Knicks took on over in the second half. And you look at BBQ in that one. Barnes, modest game, 18-5-5. Barrett, 16-5-2. And then Emmanuel quickly was the lead contributor in that one, leading scorer with 22 points. But the Raptors, they got their butts kicked in that second half, just looked like a team that simply had given up. So then it was gut check time, because you looked at this Raptors team and you're like, okay, we know they're in a rebuild. We know they're tanking, but at least beginning of the year, they were ethically tanking. They were putting up strong performances. They were putting up fights. They were actually in games till the very end. So it was gut check time for this basketball team. Second out of the back-to-back, going up against the NBA leading Cavaliers. Although it was without Donovan Mitchell, they were a massive underdog. You got a feeling as a fan like this is going to be bad. They're going to get their butts kicked. But credit to the Raptors. They actually showed a lot of promise. They fought hard. They went toe-to-toe with the NBA's best team. And it looked like they were going to pull off the biggest upset of the season. They were right in there, and if it wasn't for Darius Garland scoring 40, the Raptors would have won this game. They got big contribution from their bench. Chris Boucher in particular, we'll get to more on him in just a second here. But you look at the play of BBQ. Scotty Barnes played well. He officially surpassed 4,000 points. Congrats to him. He had 24, 8, and 10. And then after this game, Darko said, I envision Scotty averaging a triple-double in the future. And then Barrett had 25 and 5. But then Emmanuel quickly, it was the difference, right? The guard play. You saw it. You had an elite guard and then you had a guy in Quickly who you hope to become an elite guard. Just a big discrepancy in their play. Garland has taken that next step. He is a top guard, whereas Quickly, he still has to be more consistent and show you he can be that, as he had a very bad game, rough game, 10 points, 7 assists, and that was the difference. The guard play in this one was essentially the reason why the Cavaliers were able to escape with the win, relying on that Garland 40 piece and that offensive there. So you look at BBQ, clearly we need more of a sample size of these guys playing together, but it is nice to see these guys finally get some reps. First game against the Bucks, that was the first game playing with each other since March 1st, 2024. So it was a long time coming. They still got to show that they can be that trio, right? Be that, big three, if you will, that can carry the Raptors into the next era of this franchise. Can you rely on these guys? And I think my biggest, I wouldn't necessarily, I guess you could call it a concern. The thing I want to see more from the trio is they could put up their nice stats individually, but we still want to see how this team fares in closing moments of games when the game's on the line. And I still feel like this isn't a trio that has shown you that you can rely on late in games. Like in this one in particular, Barnes, Barrett having nice games. This game on the line, Scotty took a bad shot there at the end, and then it led to that Garland ice 3 to seal the win. So the execution late still remains a big question mark. Like, who's going to take the reins and be that closer? Who's going to be that guy you can trust late in games? Like Scotty, for as good as he is, he hasn't proven that he can do that. RJ has had a couple of shots at that beginning of the season. He wasn't able to come up clutch. Emmanuel Quickly, I thought, could be that guy, but he's been very inconsistent with his offense. So this is a trio that, they can have moments where they look good and they put up their numbers, but are they going to be able to close out games? And are they going to be able to come up big in clutch time? Because I know it's still early to look at that stuff, because this is a team that's tanking. They're at the bottom, but you still want to see a little bit of that where they look the part, they look somewhat good in closing situations. And that Cavaliers game was another example of this team not looking good when the game's on the line and not knowing really who to go to and how to run their offense and how they are going to get a key bucket. So that's the biggest concern I have with this trio. And we knew, like, going in, this trio had to collectively take leaps to be considered amongst one of the better trios, one of the better cores in the NBA. And you look at Scotty, coming back from injury, he's been able to put up his numbers, put up his points. The thing I'll say about Scotty is I don't think he's shown us to this point that he can be a number one that can lead your team. And really, like, to me, he's looking more like a number two at this point in time, of him being that guy, of him being that sidekick to the guy. But I'm not sure if Scotty's shown us that he is the guy. Like, you've seen his scoring's kind of taken a back seat. I know he's scoring more points this season than he did last season, but his scoring has taken more of a back seat to, like, his playmaking, his rebounding, his defense. And when I look at Scotty right now, I'm leaning towards a guy who is the sidekick to the guy. I don't know if this is necessarily the guy that can lead you to a championship on his own. So that's something that I was looking at going into the season, if Scotty can show you that he's that 1A, but he hasn't shown us that yet. So that's the thing about Scotty. And then there's moments where he still has those questionable decision-making, careless turnovers, or taking a bad shot late, or, not realizing he's got the mismatch or an advantage of taking it to the rim. Instead, he elects to shoot a long jumper, contested jumper, or a 3-point shot. I think those are the decisions that still you want to see Scotty get better at making throughout the course of the game. So that's kind of the bit on Scotty. RJ, like, he's been phenomenal this season. He's definitely taken a leap. He's been, playing well, but I think with RJ Barrett, like, he is who he is, right? Like, he's a guy that is going to help. I don't necessarily think you can count on him as a guy who's going to lead your team to winning games. Like, sure, he can lead you in scoring, but how much does he make a difference in terms of, like, actually impacting wins and losses? I think he's more of like a piece on a really good team. But of course, we'll see if he can continue to grow and show that he can bring his game to the next level. He was definitely playing like an all-star towards the beginning of the season. He's still been putting up nice numbers. And then you look at Quickly, that's the big one here, because I always viewed Quickly as the number two. And right now, like, I don't know what the pecking order is. Like, I have my doubts about Barnes being the number one. So then that begs the question, okay, who's number two, number three? And I think that's still up in the air. Like, I would say right now, RJ is more of like a number three, and then quickly still has to show us he can even be in that top three, because when you went into the season and you saw the contract that the Raptors gave quickly, you always knew they gave him that based on potential. That's why I was okay with the deal, because based on what he's shown you, obviously, you know, paying him that much, it opened a lot of eyes, but you always went into it thinking, okay, like, this is based on his potential. This is based on the player who you think he can become. And I'm going to be fair to him, because this is only his fifth game back from injury to begin this the year. But we got to see a lot more from quickly to justify that, right? Like, he's had a couple of nice games here and there, but then he'll follow that up with a disappearing act. And case in point, in a game like this, you know, he had a nice one against the Knicks, but then in a game against Cleveland, when you're going up against a top guard, you want to look the part. You want to be consistent against those top guards. Darius Garland completely obliterated him in that matchup. It wasn't even close. And it's crazy because some people even had quickly in the conversation of a Darius Garland going into the season. That conversation is nowhere near being close at this point in time. Quickly still has to show us a lot more. DG has been phenomenal. So that's the thing. You want quickly to take that jump. You want him to look the part of a Darius Garland. We all thought he could be like a Tyrese Maxey. I'm not saying he can't, but those were kind of like the high ambition. But like, even like a DG, like, you still want him to be in that range of elite guard play. And that's why the Raptors gave him that contract. But of course, quickly, first full season as a starter, he's been decimated with injuries. You want to cut him some slack, but defensively he's had some lapses, and then the inconsistency is definitely concerning. You want to see him be able to play well game to game and be that not only guy who can organize the offense, but kind of that explosive guard like Garland, who can erupt, who can be that nice 1-2 punch with Scotty Barnes and go off. And he's capable of doing that, right? Like, we know quickly he can get his three off. He can get his, you know, his offense rolling. So that's the big question about quickly. So I think it's still early to make like a definitive assumption about this trio, just because we've had such little games of them. And again, like, this was their first game played since March 1st, that game against the Bucks at the beginning of this week. So that just tells you like how much time these guys have missed. But you want to see some development. You want to see these guys kind of bridge the gap on some of the talking points that I mentioned to be considered like a bona fide big three that can lead this team to the top of the conference once again. Like, when you look at Orlando, like, you don't have a lot of questions. When you look at Paolo, Franz, they've definitely like distinguished themselves. And then some of these other teams that have taken the jump. So hopefully the Raptors can see more of that from their trio that they have seemingly built this team around. And we're going to get to it in just a second here, but the draft's going to be big, because like, if you're kind of thinking the same thing as me, where you're not sold on Scotty being the number one guy, maybe they can find a potential number one guy if they get lucky with a top 3 pick. And then you kind of like restructure it that way. So we'll see what happens with that. But all in all, it's good to see these guys healthy. It's been great to see BBQ back. And you just hope they continue to develop and progress and show you that they can be that strong trio that one day takes the East by storm. All right, guys, next, let's talk about Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher, man, he's the ultimate professional, and it shouldn't come too many as a surprise, right? What do you know? The Raptors actually have a chance to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers and look like a solid basketball team, because he got his minutes back. With no Bruce Brown, no Abaji, Boucher got extended playing time, and he absolutely ripped the Cavaliers for a nice game. Boucher was a spark from off the bench, man. He came in unconscious. He couldn't miss a damn shot. 23 points, 12 rebounds. Big reason why the Raptors even had a chance in this game. Jamal Shed, credit to him too. He and Boucher were really big from off the bench. But Boucher, man, it was just the decision-making, you know, his ability to hit the three, just being so aggressive, bringing that spark, that hustle. And really, he's had an amazing 2-game stretch. He played, 3 minutes against New York in garbage time. He rattled off 10 points. And then in this one, right from the jump, came in, completely found his groove, completely found his rhythm. And we see what a bench can do to a team. We see when you have a spark from a certain player from off the bench, it just resonates with the basketball team. And because they were able to get that from Boucher, the Raptors collectively had a strong effort, collectively had more energy in their game. And you know, Boucher, you got to tip your captain, man, because this is a guy who was falling out of the rotation, but yet he was still ready once his number was called to come in and deliver his best game of the season. So that is just an ultimate professional, in my opinion. And, you know, this is a guy who say what you want about him. You can't knock his effort and what he's meant to this team. This guy has been a part of the Raptors championship team, lone member of that team. He was a part of that epic 30-point comeback against the Mavericks. So, like, he knows what it takes to compete at a high level. He knows what it takes to win. He's been on those Kyle Lowry-led teams. So, he's learned a lot playing alongside a hard-nosed guy like Lowry of, putting your body on the line, never giving up, giving it your all. So there's value in that. And of course, he doesn't make sense long-term for this team that is rebuilding. But Boucher playing very well. It's nice to see. And I think there is a lot of value in this guy on a contending team. And speaking of which, even Begley spoke about Boucher in one of his latest pieces. And Begley went on to say that several teams have Boucher on their radar with the trade deadline less than a month away. And he did link Boucher to the Denver Nuggets organization. So Boucher, he hasn't had a consistent role, but he's still averaging 10 points and 4 rebounds and 17 minutes per game. He's in the final year of a 3-year contract, making $10.8 million. So that is a easier contract to move. So there's going to be value, it seems, for Boucher in this trade market. And I think he has proven that he can be a nice bench piece to a contending team. And again, I applaud him for how he has handled this whole situation in Toronto, because many guys not knowing their definitive role, in and out of the rotation, not getting consistent minutes, you would see that in their body language in game. But take last night, for example, like Boucher, unfazed, came in and he was just a gamer. He just played, he just hit shots, and he helped his team win. So there was a lot of value there. And I think that performance in itself really, really upped his value, which I already thought was somewhat decent. Of course, what are you going to get for him? You're going to get, you would hope, at least a second-round pick. But I think that performance against the Cavs solidified, this could be one of those more intriguing bench pieces that a contender eyes closer to the trade deadline. So shout out to Boucher. He came up in a big way. And again, I really just tip my hat to him for being the ultimate professional under these circumstances. And he was the reason why the Raptors almost pulled off that massive, massive comeback. So shout out to Boucher. He was brilliant against the Cavs and even the night before against the Knicks. All right, guys, we're going to conclude today's show by talking about the draft. So, of course, you're going to get a ton of these, rightfully so. The Raptors, they're not competing this season. They're at the bottom right now, projected with the number 3 pick. So I thought this was quite interesting. ESPN put out their latest mock draft, and they made their projections. To nobody's surprise, they have Cooper Flagg number 1. That's obviously the prize of this draft, going to Washington. They have the Pelicans getting Dylan Harper. They got the Jazz getting Ace Bailey. And then they have the Raptors getting VJ Edgecombe. So they actually have the Raptors falling a spot here and selecting 4th. Hopefully the Raptors can select in the top 3. But nonetheless, Edgecombe, you look at him, he is that, as the write-up says here, he's that guy who could play on or off the ball alongside Scotty Barnes. And that's the big thing. I still think the Raptors are looking for that guard who can play complementary to Barnes. And I feel like that's a guy who Barnes needs to play around him. Right here, his explosiveness, improving feel, and impressive defensive playmaking, 51.1% steal rate, 4.6% block rate are key attributes that point to his upside. So Edgecombe, this is a guy who he's definitely got a lot of potential. And offensively, as they say here, he's going to have to perform better offensively to secure a spot this high in the draft because the shooting has been subpar. So that's not good, obviously, for a Raptors team that needs more shooting. But it's that potential two-way ability that, can have him at the top. And if he can continue to develop and play well, it's only going to strengthen his case to be a top 5 pick in this draft. So Edgecombe, this is a guy who's on Baylor, and he's a guy who's been touted to being in the top 5 a lot. In my opinion, I think the Raptors, would be obviously better suited for a top 3 pick. And really, when I look at this draft class, I think if you can snag a Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, or Ace Bailey, because right now that's the guy who I want the Raptors to get. I think he can be absolutely electric with how he scores the basketball. That's where you want to be if you're the Raptors. I think one of these 3 guys can turn into that potential cornerstone. Not to say Edgecombe can, or even a Yakachunas, but I think if I had to make a bet and put my money on it, one of these top 3 guys will pan out. Obviously, this is the number 1 guy you want to get, but I'd be really happy with an Ace Bailey. Obviously Dylan Harper too, but I'm an Ace Bailey guy. I really think this kid is going to turn out to being something special. You know, I know he doesn't pass the ball, but the Raptors need a guy like that. They need a guy who can be selfish and just score at will. You know, he's averaging 19.9 points per game. 19.1 points per game, you know, playing alongside Dylan Harper. I think this could be a nice complementary piece to Scotty Barnes. And then even a Harper too, kind of that combo guard. He would be a nice fit. But I think the Raptors, hopefully they could get into the top 3, because outside of the top 3, they're going to have to get lucky on one of these guys, you know, truly panning out. Obviously, there's other names that have popped up, you know, a Demon, Trey Johnson. I know he's projected to go 10th here, and the Duke big. But I think if you're a Raptors fan, yeah, you definitely want to shoot in for that top 3. And I think the Raptors need that dynamic guard play. I think that's one of the things we've seen is like, look, I'm not ready to give up on Grady Dick, but man, he's been not playing that well lately. And I always kind of view Dick as maybe a 6-man on this team. Like, you always had questions about if Dick can be the confirmed 5th starter moving forward. And obviously Jacoby Walter's on the roster, but I think that's what the Raptors need. And I think it's clear to see, like, if the Raptors are able to get a Dylan Harper or who, like, whatever, a top 3, top 5 pick, even an Edgecombe, which ESPN projects here, like, Grady Dick looks like the odd man out. And I think defensively really hurts him too to justify having him in there. So I think a lot of people thought it was going to be RJ, but I think Grady, because he's kind of fallen off a bit here, it seems like whoever the Raptors draft will get that starting shooting guard role, or whatever, starting role. Because obviously if you get Flag, you'll have to shift it a bit. But I think that's what you're looking at. You know, especially if you get like an Ace Bailey or an Edgecombe, like Grady's going to the bench at that point. And then, of course, that begs the question, what happens with RJ and all of that? You know, even quickly, how does he look with this team at that point? You just paid him, so you're kind of committed to him and Barnes, obviously. But I think for the Raptors, yeah, hopefully they can get lucky, get into that top 3, because like I said, I think Flag, Harper, or Bailey can turn into something special. And the Raptors obviously need a guy right now. Like, they need talent, and it's been evident, right? Like, beyond the effort level, all that, you can see the Raptors, they are lacking talent when going up against some of these teams like the Bucks, the Knicks. I know they had it against the Cavs, but again, no Donovan Mitchell. This team needs talent, and they need a blue chip prospect. And as I said earlier, you're still not even sold on this trio, and Barnes is being the guy. So you need talent to kind of continue to get pieces so you can see how you can build this thing properly and hopefully one day build a contender once again here in Toronto. But that's going to conclude today's pod, guys. Let me know your thoughts on some of the talking points. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. As always, thanks so much for watching. This is Luca signing off. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will catch you all again in the next one.